Welcome, everyone, to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and today I'm excited to continue the series with you talking about the CTC ROI calculator available on our website. And we're going to be focusing today on one workflow in particular. We're going to keep this series going with workflow by workflow here, and today we're talking about door and wall fire ratings and how we can do this as effectively as possible. Now, of course, as always, our webinars are recorded, so if you're joining us live, fantastic. And if you're watching this as a recording, also fantastic. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you would, and be notified when these webinars do actually go live. Now, for those of you who are participating with us live in the webinar as we're presenting this, we encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A window in GoToWebinar. We try to answer those as we're going through the workflow. So without further ado, let's jump in and actually take a look at today's workflow in detail. So in our previous webinar, we actually introduced the tool on our website that helps you understand specific workflows and potential time savings, and ultimately helping you realize what that return on investment might be. So today, in this session, we're going to be going in depth and really exploring how this workflow can help you out by breaking it down, by taking you through what the different steps are, identifying some of the pitfalls, and really helping to alleviate this whole painstaking process of manually documenting wall fire ratings, manually associating door fire ratings, and documenting those within the walls. That whole thing, we can save hours upon hours of time multiple times throughout the life cycle of a project for multiple people. So we're going to be identifying this specifically. My goal here is to really help you revolutionize your whole approach to fire rating and doing this as efficiently as is possible. So we're going to cover a couple of things. First off, I'm going to, of course, go through the ROI calculator and take a look at what the workflow is there. And then after we do that, we're going to be outlining the steps for the workflow manually, so we understand what it is we're trying to achieve. And then I want to demonstrate the workflow kind of in an automated fashion. What could you get to by using these tools? And then so that you know how this got set up in the first place, I want to describe how I configured this. So we're going to talk about what's the issue. We're going to actually take a look at the steps to do it manually. I'm going to demonstrate what you could do to do it automatically, so we can do a very contrasting description there. And then we're going to be going through and actually showing you how to set this up within the tools. And as always with our settings, if you're like, hey, Sean, I really want those tools, I want that settings file so I can repeat what you're doing, reach out to us. We're all about that. Hit up, info@ctcsoftware.com. You can always get access to any of our data sets from any of our webinars by using that connection point. So first off, let's talk about identifying the issue here. And I want to start this by taking a look at the portal. We're going to go back to that ROI calculator. All right. So here on the website here at ctcsoftware.com, and I'm going to resources, I'm going back to the ROI calculator. We did this in the previous session, so I'm not covering all of the picks and clicks. This, of course, is a building workflow, and the task that I'm going to be taking a look at here is the very first one on the list, door and wall fire rating coordination. Now, this is just looking at the door and wall fire rating specifically. There's other aspects of fire rating that we're not even going to talk about with this. We're just talking about that one part of it. We're going to save time across the entire workflow as best we can. So currently, when I've talked with some of my architectural acquaintances out there in industry who do this on a regular basis, they're saying that every time they have to go through and validate this, it takes them about 2 hours or 120 minutes. Let's actually just set this in hours so we can see this. 2 hours it approximately takes to go through and do the fire rating coordination for doors and walls, looking through the full plan set, making sure the walls are right, making sure the doors are right, validating, cross-checking with the code sheets, all that information. It takes time to verify, is this the correct fire rating for the windows, the openings, the doors, all the things, all the fire barriers. And this can happen up to, say, 2 times a week. Sometimes for some of you, it's once a week per person. Maybe you want to just do 1 time a week, or maybe this one person's doing it all the time and they're doing like 12 of these. Maybe it's 12 times a week, but only one guy's doing the work, right? You can decide how it is you want to focus on this time, right? My default here is just 2 times a week for 2 different people doing the work, but you can break that out however you'd like. Now, we talked before about what the cost is, and I have just a generic number here, $100 an hour. You could take a look at this from the billable rate of the, well, you could take a look at this from like the paycheck rate for a person. Maybe this person's making $25 an hour. Maybe it's, $30 an hour, whatever that is, but that has a cost annually for them doing this work. If every week they're taking a look at, 2 of these 2 people doing this, that has a cost, right? If it's, 12 a week for one person, whatever, that has a cost, $37,000 in just doing this particular task at that rate, right? That's time, that's money that gets spent. There's also the concept of how much does this bill out on the project? How much of the design budget is it consuming? So if we put in here, let's say you bill your project billable time out at $150 an hour, that is a different cost. That's how much it's costing you from the design budget on the project, and you could be allocating that elsewhere. And so down here, we're talking about if you were to use the BIM Project Suite tool, the tool that we're going to use today, Spreadsheet Link, and a couple of other tools I'll be mixing into the mix here, specifically fire rating. With that suite, it's going to have a time savings of 381 potential hours of time that could go back to project design budgets, whatever. And that time doesn't change based on the billable rate. What does change based on billable rate is how much cost you're saving annually with using a tool like this. If this takes you 10 minutes with the tool and it takes you, 2 hours to do manually by hand each time you do this, that's a pretty significant time savings and cost savings, right? So the whole point of this discussion today is just how do we achieve this particular thing, door and wall fire rating coordination, and wall fire ratings in general, how do we deal with this? So real quick, let's just outline this issue real quick. Manual fire rating documentation is incredibly tedious. For wall fire rating manual documentation, placing tags, placing graphics, that manual process is tedious. That wasn't even outlined in that workflow that I just did. Manual validation of openings within those walls is equally as tedious. That's the 2 hours I was talking about for time savings. The time spent manually doing any kind of code checking is effectively time not spent on your actual design. It's taking away from your design budget. The way that we often bid projects, like that time is valuable, and if every week you could save 2 additional hours and put that back into the project design budget and production budget, instead of spending it on something else, that could be meaningful. So there is what we talked about last time, there's this opportunity cost that you can identify. Like if I can take that time and opportunistically dedicate it elsewhere, that has potential big value, where I could provide more value to the customer rather than these menial tasks of boringly going through and checking code sheets. Here's another issue. Manual validation is quite error prone. Depending on who's doing this and what their specialties are, there can often be a lot of errors that pop up, and that means red lines, that means change items. These errors, they do cost you additional time, and this isn't counted in that ROI calculator. This is effectively a hidden cost of a manual workflow. And we can, for the most part, really eliminate these manual costs, these manual, hidden costs of this manual workflow by automating the process. And there's one other thing that's a big deal here that's kind of an important note. Delays can often occur in this whole process because if you have a single person doing this workflow and they get tied up on something else, well, that can cause a delay on your project because they weren't able to get to it because you need their manual expertise to take a look at something. And their time is valuable. Their time is, if you have a lot of projects and this 1 person or 2 people team is doing all the code checking and validation and fire rating stuff, if that's the way that you're running it, that's okay. It's just there's delays because we only have a limited amount of time in our day, right? Each person has a limited amount of time that they can actually dedicate to something. So that can be an important thing to consider as far as, hidden costs, opportunity costs, like all of that when we're talking about ROI. So let's just take a look at some of the high-level manual steps real quick. We need to establish wall fire ratings, and we need to have those assigned to the proper walls. We need to document those wall fire ratings in some form or fashion. I'm going to be taking a look at how we can quickly do that. We need to coordinate those wall fire ratings with the openings, because the openings need to be updated as well. And then we need to validate and understand the code via some manual workflow typically to do this. This is the manual workflow here in this case. And this is, again, often done by a specialist, and then they redline, and then we enter the data back in the project, and then they end up re-evaluating to make sure we didn't screw it up. And then if we did, then we have to go back, and there's multiple cycles on this. This is where that 2 hours of time each week by multiple people can come into play, because there's often multiple iterations on this prior to getting check sets and whatnot printed out. And often, this really does need to be repeated multiple times. This isn't a one and done. This is, as we're doing a check set, there may have been major changes, and so you have to revalidate this, and that takes time. So let's take a look at a much more automated workflow. I'm going to show you how you can do this in an automated way as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I'm going to do this live inside of Revit. So I have an architectural project model pulled up. I have a code plan here, a life safety plan where I want to do some of my documentation of fire ratings. An example of something that might need to be documented here so I can identify what's going on might be these walls here around the vertical circulation components. This component right here, this wall, is a 6 3/4 inch wall assembly, type C wall. If I go take a look at its type definition, it is listed out as a 1 hour fire rating in this case. These walls surrounding the elevator shaft, they are a different type of wall, a concrete wall. In this case, they are listed out with a fire rating of 2 hours, just given how I've set this up. And I believe this back wall here is probably listed as a 3 hour wall. Yeah, it looks like that is what that is. Now, you might not agree with my fire ratings. That is absolutely fine. Of course, the goal here is to be able to very quickly identify what walls are rated as what without having to click manually and go into the definition each wall type by wall type. And I want to see how that's allocated across the project so that I can validate what's going on here. And for that step, instead of manually doing this, I'm going to use the fire rating tool. Instead of manually hand checking each wall assembly when it just looks like 2 lines in the floor plan, my fire rating tool here, I can see what the wall type names are. I can very quickly see how many of them exist in the project, how many instances there are, and I can see what their associated fire rating is. And from here, I can modify the fire ratings of these walls as well if I needed to. If I saw something that was incorrectly allocated, say somebody had duplicated this tile wall down here, and maybe this was originally set to something like 2 hours, obviously that would be incorrect. So I could go through and just quickly visually validate, like, this wall should not be a 2 hour rated wall assembly. So I could simply edit this wall and modify just the rating to make it nothing, for example. And it's going to update that fire rating for all of those wall types, and it will be done. So then I will be more accurate with what my values are, just quickly seeing this. Now, you could technically do this from a schedule as well. Totally acceptable if you were to do this from a schedule. But in my case, I'm doing it from an automated tool because my next step then is to validate my mappings. My mappings here is what kind of graphic do I want to use in the floor plan to identify what's going on here. I could use something like a detail component family that repeats every so often, so a repeating detail potentially. I could use a line style, and I've already got my line styles mapped because my template, my corporate template, already has these wall types in it, and it already has the line styles that relate to those in it as well. And then I also have one final thing here for the wall tag for my rated walls, a particular tag that I want to use. You might not like the graphics, that's okay. This is just a wall tag family. You can customize the graphics to be whatever you want. We're just using this so we can identify this real quickly. You can also save these mappings and reload these mappings in the future. So if for some reason the walls got purged from your project, or maybe you don't have them in your template, that's fine. You can always load the mappings before you do this. So any walls that do exist with their fire ratings, they automatically get a consistent graphic set. So that's an easy thing. We actually have an intro video on fire rating and how to do this. In my case, I'm just going to quickly generate graphics for just this floor plan view, since this is the only view that we'll be looking at today. I'm going to be generating, updating, and removing any wall tags with a spacing of every 10 feet, and it's going to make sure that these wall tags are not within 2 feet of the end of a wall so that it keeps my graphics nice, neat, and consistent. And so I'm going to generate these graphics real quick. So what this does is rip through my floor plan very fast, and it draws the fire rating graphics on every wall that has a fire rating with those 1, 2, or 3 hour ratings. And now I can quickly, did I just close all of Revit? No, I just closed the tool and it happened to refresh forward. So now I can quickly see here, like around these shaft areas, there's some 2 hour walls. There's 2 hours around this vertical shaft. There's a 1 hour wall here, dividing off this stair entry. At the back of my building over here, there's a number of 2 hour walls around these vertical shafts, since this is all vertical circulation and this is sort of attached to that, plus a 3 hour wall here on the exterior of my building. Again, you can fire rate however you'd like, but this quick visual validation helps you see exactly what's going on with these components. Now, the next step here is, instead of me manually looking at this door and going, okay, is there glass in that door? Is there not glass? Is there a transom or not? Is it a flush panel door? And figuring this out, I can simply run a workflow that automatically looks at this and says, what's the door assembly? What's the wall? Is this an interior or an exterior wall? And it can set the rating automatically for me. So let's just quickly do this. I'm going to go to Spreadsheet Link. This is the tool that I'm going to use. I'm going to show this visually, though I could do it completely without any kind of user interface here. I'm just going to do this so you can see it happen. Door instance fire rating from walls. What this is going to do is refresh a bunch of data here in my project. And it's going to fill out all of my door fire ratings automatically, looking up what wall host they are in. So it knows where these doors are hosted, what wall or ceiling or roof or whatever that these doors are in. And it's going to rate them accordingly based on whatever that object happens to be. In my case, I'm only focusing on the walls. And so with the walls, I'm choosing to only include walls that actually have a fire rating. That's going to be it. If it doesn't have a fire rating or smoke rating of some sort, it won't even be in this list. I'm automatically filtering those out. I'm keeping all those walls so I know which one is which. My doors here now are saying, hey, well, it looks like most of these are in 90-minute scenarios. Some of these are 45-minute scenarios here. This is a glass door in I'm not sure what wall that would be, but it's got in some kind of a wall out there that lets it be 45 minutes. Perhaps it's exterior. There's a couple of 20-minute doors here. These are flush panels in 1 hour rated walls. So this is just going through and validating all these doors on my behalf, and it just gets the ratings set for every one of them. And I could simply apply this right back to my project. And now all of my doors are going to have their appropriate ratings. And it does this just in a matter of seconds. What I could have also done is run this completely without a UI. So in this case, it updated 244 doors. Actually, it changed all but 59 of my doors with some kind of a value here. I could have run that completely blindly with no UI at all using the Spreadsheet Link Express tool and just run it, and it would have done it. So this particular door right here, if I go take a look at the fire rating for this, this is a 90-minute door. This exterior door right here, it's also a 90-minute door, just given what the rules were that I set up. This door over here looks like it's a 45-minute door, right? I didn't have to go through and do this by hand. This happened very quickly, and this is just one floor plan in this building, but I could do the whole building in probably less than 5 minutes if I wasn't talking and just let it run, right? That'd be really quick. So meaningful workflow here. So what I want to do, so you can know exactly how this works, is I want to show you how you can create this workflow. What are your next steps? Well, one, you can just get my settings that I'm going to show you today. If you're like, Sean, this is way too complex, I want to start with what you wrote, totally understood. Reach out to us, get these settings. If you are instead wanting to build this up yourself and fully validate all of these rules, and I would expect you to do that because that's the right thing to do since I only handled a very few of the rules in this list, you should definitely kind of look at these and understand how this works. So let's actually go through the exercise of building this workflow up to a degree. Now I'm going to reopen Spreadsheet Link, and I want to show you exactly what I did to put this together. There are two things that you need. You need your doors list. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my doors. You will also need your walls. You probably will want your roofs and you may want your ceilings as well, but I'm focusing today on just walls in my data pull. With these two things, it's going to pull all instances of all of the doors. That's going to be here. It's going to pull all instances of all of the walls. That's going to be on a new tab that's going to show up over here in just a moment. Right now, it's thinking through and pulling all the wall properties here. Pull this across so we can see this. It's grabbing all the types and instances. Once it has these two things, I'm going to pull a couple of items that I know that I need. So with the walls, the spreadsheet link will automatically extract its element IDs. And we use this because the doors themselves will help me identify. If I go back here to doors, it will know what its host is. It knows what it's hosted by. Most doors are hosted. So I'm going to grab the host ID here. So this number here will most likely match up with walls over here, and that's fantastic. Now I'm going to do something special with my walls over here. I'm going to be pulling in a couple of fields. I want to pull in the, let's see, we're going to do the fire rating. This fire rating value is a type property, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that type value and add it to my walls list here. Oops, I grabbed the door fire rating. That wasn't what I meant to do at all. Walls fire rating. That's what I meant to go grab, fire rating. Here we go. And I'm also going to care what the use of the door is. I believe it's called use. Nope, it's not called use. It's called structural usage. Nope, that's not it. I forget what that was called. I'm just going to look through my properties real quick here. I should have written that down ahead of time. Is it category? No, it's not category. Nope. Assembly. Good Lord, I should have taken a look at that. Well, I'll pull it up later. It's going to help me identify whether it is an interior wall or an exterior wall. A function. There it is. It's the function of the wall. Interior versus exterior versus, there's probably others in here that are going to be like retaining walls or other types of items. So I'm going to use this in my lookup because my fire rating determines values differently if it's an interior wall or an exterior wall and what some of the usage is. So I'm going to care about that. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do was get rid of anything that did not have any kind of fire rating. So if the value is empty, I want to get rid of it. So I'm going to use the fire rating property here. F here for fire rating, fire rating value. And if that value equals empty, if it's blank, then I don't want it. In fact, it's going to be not equals. The value does not equal empty. That's what I want. So I'm going to be filtering out stuff that I know that I don't care about. And for the walls, that's really all I care about. I want to get all the walls that have a fire rating, every instance of every wall with its element ID, its fire rating if it has one, and the function of that particular wall. So now that I have that list, on my doors side, I know what the host is. So I can match up the wall values with my door values. And I now have here also a fire rating, which is the wrong fire rating. So let's get rid of that here. So for my doors, I have the host ID and I wanted fire rating here, fire rating instance value. And somehow I got fire rating added here and I wanted to remove it, but it's not going away. There we go. Let's add it one more time. Remove that. Well, it's being squirrely. I need to get rid of the column here. We'll get rid of that a little bit later on. What I really care about is the host ID and the fire rating. And actually, there's one other property that I probably care about because I care if this door has glazing. And so I'm going to go take a look at the panel definition here, the panel type. So with this panel type value, I will be able to identify exactly which what kind of construction this door is. If it's a flush panel, if it's a full glass panel or a narrow glass or a half glass, if there's glass involved, that's going to change what the fire rating actually is. And you'll notice that these ones already have a value in here because I published them in earlier, but we're going to write a routine here to go through and find out what kind of panels these are and what their host is to figure out what's going on. Now, you could also go take a look at the frame type. So if you wanted to know what the frame was, frame type, here we go. I could also take that frame type property and understand like what's going on with it, right? How is that configured here? It looks like I got some screwiness going on here. I need to restart this, I think. That's okay. Let's just reload some settings here. Since I've already done all of this, let's reload those settings that I did earlier. And so you'll see the exact layout of what I have. It's the exact same items. It's walls and doors. The walls are filtered for does not equal empty, and that's perfect. On the doors area over here, there's no filtration on doors. The parameters are pulling host ID, panel type, frame type, fire rating. These are the exact properties we were just looking at. And then over here, you'll notice that I have a checkbox in front of fire rating. It's a calculated value because I have a formula in this F column. And I use that formula here to figure out, it looks up the host ID on the walls tab, finds the related wall, finds the wall's fire rating, and then from that fire rating, it looks at the door and says, am I a glass door or not? And from that, it determines what its fire rating is. So for you to know all of these different kinds of rules, one of the things you probably need to have pulled up in front of you are, what are the fire ratings? So I went and did a quick search. I live in Minnesota. I asked for Minnesota fire ratings here, and I'm up on UpCodes. It's a great little viewer of codes here. You can view all areas codes by using this particular tool. And I'm looking at section 716.5, fire door and shutter assemblies. And for this is telling me things like, for barriers that have some kind of fire resistance of greater than 1 hour, these are the rating assembly definitions for the walls. These are the fire ratings for the doors themselves. There's some other properties here about side light and transom fire ratings and some fire resistance lookups that I could go to for that. Down below, there's shaft walls here, 2-hour ratings on those specifically with whatever the door fire rating is, in this case, 90 minutes, an hour and a half on this one. Whether or not they can have glass or not, all this stuff. Exterior walls, so exterior wall assemblies here, all the data is here. All I have to do is translate this data into something that I can put into my doors, which for me, a third of an hour, if I wanted to put this value in, that would be 20 minutes. So I want to be able to put in 20 minutes on the door in my environment, in my project. And then also, if the door happens to be glazed or has a vision panel, then it talks about what the greatest square inch of that vision panel happens to be and what some of those other code specialties are. So I can back check all of this on my doors as well and make sure that I don't have too large a piece of glass, or if I do have glass, that I'm understanding what that means from a fire rating point of view for the fire protection of those glazed environments. Right? So I can check all of this. This is important. This is important to know, to be able to, but I don't want to have to read this every single time and back validate this. I'm just going to write a routine that's going to help me do all of this work for me, because the computer is really good at saying, oh, this is an exterior wall. The rating is 3 hours. So the fire rating value needs to be 90 minutes, right? And if there's a vision panel, then the fire rating needs to be 3 hours. So whatever that is, right? Like I can put that in there and have that be a part of my automated check. You can do this. And I can do this if I go back into Revit. I've already written a formula here that does a lot of those checks that I needed to check to figure out what the rating is of a thing, what those rules happen to look like. And now if you look at this, it looks really complicated. And I understand that. I'm going to break it down for you because I want you to understand what I'm doing for this check and how you could write your own. I wrote this in a program that I use called Notepad++, and then I copy pasted it into the formula here in F4, because again, remember, this is a calculated value. The fire rating column is calculated. So I just pasted it here and it auto-fills it down for every one of my doors. And when I'm all done, I can save my settings to make this 100% repeatable, because as I just did here, I loaded up my settings and it already has this formula pre-written and it knows how to do a bunch of stuff. So let's decode this a little bit so you can see exactly how this formula is working and how you could write your own. And one more time, I'm just going to remind you, if you want this as an inspiration to start with, I'm going to encourage you to reach out. info@CTC Software, you can get exactly my settings file that will let you do exactly what I'm doing here, assuming you have a fire rating instance parameter on your doors. Doesn't even matter what the shared parameter is, as long as it's called fire rating, you're good to go. So let me jump into Notepad++ here. Oop, I meant to pull Revit forward. We're going to leave this out here. We're going to have Notepad++ pulled up next to it here, and we're going to take a look. This formula up on top, I've reformatted it to make this just a little bit easier to read. I say a little bit because I get it. Formulas are never super fun to read, but I'm going to blow this up for you so you can see this a little bit more clearly out here. So this is nothing but a glorified if statement. It's asking for a couple of different things. If this is true, then do this value. That's simple as it is. And we do that ourselves when we're looking at that code checklist. If it's in an exterior wall, I go to this area. If the exterior wall's rating is such and such, I take a look at that row. And from that row, if it's got glazing or no glazing, I make a choice as to what the values are supposed to be. Here, I'm doing the exact same thing. So what I'm doing is I'm doing an if statement. There's actually, if I highlight the little parentheses here, you'll see it highlights the correlating one down here, and that'll be true for each of these. As I'm selecting through, you'll actually be able to see the paired up parentheses. I love this when I'm writing Excel formulas because it makes my life very easy. But you're going to see sort of a repeating occurrence here of a certain kind of check that I'm going to run. Right here is that core for this. The core here is doing an index and match. In a previous webinar, I went through the list of functions in Excel that you need to know to take the best advantage of Spreadsheet Link. And index and match is one of those. It is so incredibly powerful. It lets you pull data from one tab to another in a very easy and logical way. I'm going to start at the very inside here. I'm doing a match. I'm looking at the C4 value, which in this case, C4 is this host ID. And as this auto fills down, it'll automatically, for the next row, go to C5 and C6 and C7 and so on all the way down. We're looking at this one row right here. So for this one row with this host ID, it's going to find that host ID. It's going to look in the walls A column. The A column is always the element ID column. So it's going to find the correlating element ID in that column, if there is one. And it's looking for here, the little 0 here, that means exact match. So it's going to look there for the exact row that has exactly this host ID. And then from that, this index portion right here, what this is going to do is pull back the value from the C column, from that exact same row. So this is finding a row. This is giving me the column that it's going to pull it back from. The C column in the walls area over here is the fire rating. So it's looking for a fire rating. That's specifically what that formula is doing, is it's finding me a fire rating value. And the very first check here is looking to see if that value is empty. Now, if it can't find a match, remember, I'm filtering that list down so that it only shows me walls that have a fire rating. If it can't find a match, this little if error command right here is saying, give back nothing if you get an error. If there's no error and it's still empty for some reason, it's still going to give back nothing. But the goal here is to say, well, if it's nothing here, if it matches nothing, if it matches an empty cell, just put nothing, put no value in the door. That's what's happening right here for this one. It didn't find a match for a fire rated wall, so it put nothing in, right? That's going to be the vast majority of my doors most likely. That's the very first check. And if it's done, if it finds that, it just stops. But if it does come back with a value, if it's not empty and it has a fire rating, well, that's great. Then it's going to run some extra checks here. I have two major checks. First off, is it interior or is it exterior? And so I'm looking here for that same match. It's going to do a match on that same value. It's going to look it up again, and it's going to find that exact match, and it's going to look in the D column for walls. The D column is the function. This is whether it's interior or exterior. And that's important because the rules for fire ratings change if it's interior versus exterior. So if it's interior, then it runs through a series of checks. And if it's not interior, it runs a different series of checks so that it knows to look, for the right rules here. Now, let's say that it is interior. I don't know if this wall is interior or not. I couldn't tell you, but let's say that it's an interior wall. If it's interior, what it's going to do next is it's going to look on the doors tab on the D4 cell right here in D4, and it's going to try and find a G in there. All of my panel types are named based on whether they're a glass or not, and it uses a G in the coding. Full glass or flush panel or narrow glass or hollow glass or, half glass, Dutch glass. Like there's all kinds of different codes here that I have for my panel types, and that's called out on my other sheets to identify what panel is what. But this one has a G in it. So because it has a G, it's a glass door. And because it's a glass door, it's going to follow the rules underneath the glass checking section. And if it does not find a G, Then what it's going to do is it's going to come over here and look as if it's not a glass door, and it's going to look at the wall ratings and say, well, if it's a 1 hour wall, then it's going to be a 20-minute door or a 90-minute door or a 45-minute door or 90-minute door, depending on what's going on there for the different ratings here. So looking within there, after I figure out if the door is glass or not glass, has glass or no glass, I'm going to go to the next little check here. That's this little piece right here. And once again, you'll see a familiar check. Match for that row. Find that row again, the same row that I found up here. Find it here and pull it from the C column to find the fire ratings. This time, I'm doing a left call on it, and I'm only getting one value back, the very first left character, the leftmost character from that wall fire rating. And I'm doing that because I don't want an entire one space HR. This is actually future-proofing this. If somebody was to go in here and put one HR instead of one space HR or one dash HR or one underscore HR, it's still finding the very first character as a 1. And that's what I want. I want to know if it's a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. So if you put HR after it, I don't care. If you just put a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I don't care. I'm finding the right row with that, so I know if it's a 1, 2, or 3 hour rated wall. Now, once I know that, if the value equals a 1 and it's glass, then it says, you're 45 minutes. It puts this 45 minutes back into the actual door. That's where these values here are ultimately coming from. 90-minute, 45-minute, right? There's 20 minutes inside of here someplace. It's looking for what do I put back in when I find a true match. So it's saying if it's 1 hour and has glass, it's 45 minutes. If it's 1 hour, if it's 2 hour and has glass, it's 90 minutes here, right? It's got that in there. And then if it's not glass, if it doesn't find glass in the first place, it goes to the next area. And it says, does the same exact lookup. And it says, okay, well, you weren't glass, so I'm going to give you back a different value. If you're a 1 hour wall, it uses the exact same left index, match the value for that row, find the row that it is, and give me the rating. And if it's 1 hour rating, then it says, okay, well, you don't have glass, so you're a 20-minute door. You don't have glass and it's in a 2 hour wall, well, that's a 90-minute door, right? And this is all just values pulled directly out of that table. I just went through and read it and found out, like, I was really bored one day and wanted to figure out those ratings. And so I went through it and I wrote these rules up. I only handled 1 and 2 hour walls, and you need to handle 3 hour walls and 4 hour walls and more of the exteriors and exteriors with glass and all this stuff. But you can absolutely go through and just work with this. Now, again, if this wasn't an interior, it would be an exterior. So this is the if it's an interior. This is the it's not an interior, so it's an exterior door. And I'm running the exact same checks. On an exterior 1 hour wall, glass or no glass in my case, it's 45 minutes. And if it's 2 hour, it's 90 minutes. Now, I should be putting in here some glass checks as well. I could just copy and paste this entire thing down below and have that embedded in there and then fill out the values correctly for 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour with and without glass. But I didn't go that far. For my example here, this was enough to kind of show you how this could work. But this really is just a big if statement. That's all this is. So with that, once you've got this all worked out, you can copy and paste that formula right back up here on top. And once you have that formula in here and it automatically fills itself down, you'll notice that here the index is looking at C119. It's looking at the correct row because it autofills down just like normal autofill would. And it's looking at the correct row to figure out what's this wall's host ID, what's its rating, what's this one's rating, right? Like it just keeps going down for each one of these and it checks it for every single door. Computers can do this in a matter of seconds, right? It takes us hours to manually validate this. Computers can do this in seconds, and I can make a repeatable workflow that I can run on my project to identify the doors, the walls out here with their ratings to visually validate that they are correct. And then I can use this exact same workflow right here with these settings to validate the doors that are in that same exact project. So instead of me needing to wait for a red line cycle to go through 2 or 3 or 4 times, especially right before printing, I can very quickly validate this and be done with this one manual step in minutes instead of hours. And that's huge. That lets me focus more on design than manually focusing on manual data entry and potentially causing errors that could be a big problem. As long as my floor plan is accurately drawn, as long as my wall fire ratings are accurately assigned, any doors within there can accurately have their fire rating automatically assigned based on rules. That's a huge, huge step. So for your next steps, I'm going to encourage you to try this for yourself. Again, if you want to reach out and get the core settings to start with something that's already working, we are more than happy to get those in your hands if it's meaningful for you. So just reach out, info@CTC Software, and you can absolutely get those settings in hand for yourself. So with that, I want to say one more time here, just thank you. I want to say thank you for all of you who participate with us live and you've had the chance to ask some questions. And we're about to get in the Q&A session here. But for those of you who have asked questions, we're going to be answering those in a minute. For those of you watching this on YouTube, on the recording after the fact, we encourage you to reach out with any questions or comments about how we could make this better for you. But we always thank you when you take a look at our webinars and participate with us live. We encourage you to take a look at our events page on ctcsoftware.com and sign up for future webinars just like this one that hopefully will give you quite a bit of value back to your daily workflows.